In this video, we're going to talk about the structure of a turn. We'll also talk about priority and when you can and can't play certain effects. So let's kick things off with a basic primer on priority. There is a lot packed into the concept of priority, but for our purposes today, we're going to cover what you need to understand the basics of a turn. Priority is actually a relatively simple concept. Only one player is able to act at a time. The way that I like to think about priority is that each player at the table has a light bulb in front of them. If their light is on, they have priority. Underneath their light is a button that represents passing priority to the next player. Once they press that button and pass priority, the next player's light turns on. When each player has passed and the stack is empty, you can move to the next part of the turn. Let's take a look at all of the phases of a turn. There are 5 phases that have steps within them, which we'll cover in a bit. The phases of a turn are the beginning phase, pre-combat main phase, combat phase, post-combat main phase, and the ending phase. The beginning phase has 3 steps: untap, upkeep, and draw. In the untap step, all of your permanents like lands, creatures, artifacts, etc. become untapped. No one gets priority in this step. You just untap your stuff. The light never turns on here, and we go straight to the upkeep step. At the start of upkeep, any at the beginning of your upkeep triggers go on the stack. Then the player whose turn it is has their light turn on first. You can cast instants, activate abilities, or just pass the light. It goes around the table until everyone passes. Then we go to the draw step. At the beginning of the draw step, you draw a card for the turn. This is what is called a turn-based action, and it happens before anything else can be acted on in this step. Then your light turns on and you get priority. Players can act, pass the light, and when everyone passes, we move to the first main phase. Let's assume that it's your turn and we've moved to your first main phase. Your light turns on immediately and no other player can act until you do something that requires other players to pass priority. In your main phase, you can cast sorceries and creatures, play a land, and so on. Each time you do something that goes onto the stack, each other player has to pass for that effect to resolve. When you're ready to move to combat, the stack has to be empty, and each player starting with you has to pass priority. So now we have moved into the combat phase of the turn. The combat phase has 5 steps: beginning of combat, declare attackers, blockers, combat damage, and the end of combat. It's important to note that this phase always happens during your turn, and all other steps and phases for that matter. Sometimes players will say that they skip combat, or just move to another part of the turn, like the end step, but it's worth pointing out that you're implicitly moving through all of these steps and phases. Check out my video on shortcuts we often take for a deeper dive into that. The beginning of combat is the last window to act before attackers are chosen. Any triggers that say "at the beginning of combat" are put onto the stack, and then your light turns on first. You can crew vehicles, give creatures haste, and make other instant speed plays before you move to attacks. When everyone passes, we go to declare attackers. Once we've moved to declare attackers, a turn-based action happens with no one's light on. You choose attackers, and who they're attacking, pay any attack taxes like Ghostly Prison, and attackers tap unless they have vigilance. Then all "when this attacks" and "when you attack" triggers go onto the stack. Now your light turns on, and you and other players can respond. When the stack is empty and everyone passes, we go to declare blockers. Again, no one's light is on at first. Defenders choose blockers all at once in player order. Then any "when this blocks" or similar triggers go on the stack, and your light turns on first. After everyone passes, we go to combat damage. Damage is assigned and dealt as part of the step. There's no priority between assignment and damage. After damage is dealt and any resulting triggers are put onto the stack, your light turns on. Importantly, this happens during both the first strike step and the regular combat damage step, depending on whether or not a creature involved in combat has first or double strike. The takeaway is that everyone gets a chance to act after each damage step. And then when everyone passes on an empty stack, we go to end of combat. And before we get there, I'll do a shameless plug for my first and double strike video. Go check that out if you need a deeper look into how the first strike and combat damage steps work in more detail. In the end of combat step, any "at the end of combat" triggers go onto the stack. Your light then turns on first. After the stack is empty and everyone passes, we go to main phase 2. In your post-combat main phase, you can do everything you did in your first main phase. You can play a land for turn if you haven't already, cast sorceries, creatures, etc. And just like before, your priority light turns on first, and you only pass it to other players when you need to resolve something on the stack, or if the stack is empty and you want to move to the end phase of your turn. The ending phase of the turn has 2 steps, the end step and the cleanup step. In the end step, any at the beginning of the end step triggers fire automatically and are put on the stack. Then your light turns on first. This is the last window in which any player will receive priority during your turn. If someone wants to flag priority and cast an instant or flash in a creature before the end of your turn, then they need to do it here. The strategy behind playing like this is that you're able to wait until the last possible moment to act with maximum information. You can see if other players have removal first, see which creatures and sorceries are cast during the main phases, etc. And then once each player passes with an empty stack, we move to the cleanup step. You discard down to hand size and remove until end of turn effects and damage marked on creatures. Normally, no one gets priority here and the turn ends. A rare exception to note is if something triggers or a state change happens during cleanup, the light will briefly turn on to resolve it, and then we do another cleanup and finish. There's a lot to remember here, and it can sometimes be helpful to print a turn tracker out to help everyone understand where we're at in the turn. I've done that in my playgroups before, and it's quite useful to have as a reminder if you need it. 2 things you can use in your next game to level up your play. Remember that a step or phase only advances when the stack is empty and every player has passed in order. And if you want to act in a specific window, say it out loud, before attackers, in your upkeep, etc., so the light clearly stops when it's given to you. Remember that priority always gets passed in these steps and phases, even if it's getting shortcut. Knowing your rights is critical in making better decisions. If you want a deeper dive specifically into parts of the turn that often get shortcut, check out my video where I did a complete breakdown. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.